Hello everyone, good morning. Let's wait for 1 or 2 minutes for others to dial in. Hello, very good morning. Yeah, let's get started, guys. We have we were covering the navigation in Fusion Cloud application. Yeah, we've covered few bits yesterday. We have talked about how a page looks like, the home page especially. We've talked about the layout options available, and we've also seen how you could change the layout quickly using a sandbox as well. Even though we didn't discuss the sandbox in greater detail, we at least now know what it can be used for. So we have a UI customizations session down the line, and in that session we'll talk about the sandbox in detail. And we've also tried to cover a few navigation aspects in ERP Cloud. So let's look at the other options available or that you need to be aware of. So we'll cover the other navigation aspects today, and if time permits, we will move on to the next module as well. So in ERP Cloud, so if you go into a particular page, say for example, if you go into a specific page such as say receivables, and you go into billing page, whenever you go into a specific work area, there are few things that would remain common in the user interface. Irrespective of the work area you go, there are some common things that you need to be aware of. Like every work area would have a landing page like this. Landing page might look slightly different between applications. In the case of billing, it looks like this. You have a table here, and you have important options available here. But if you go to payables, you might have a similar screen, but with a different layout. Maybe if you go into payables, invoices, you see a similar screen again. Any invoice that needs your attention, and a few options which would help you to, or which would help the payables user to get down to the work that he has to do. So the screens would look similar, and each work area would have a few things in common. So let me explain those few things that you need to be aware of. So if you go into receivables, go into billing, what do you notice? So we are trying to understand the application from user standpoint, not from a developer standpoint. So if I'm a receivables user, if I come in here, what's the first thing I would expect to see? If there is anything that needs my attention, I should see them straight up in this particular table, and it only displays the incomplete transactions, meaning transactions which were created but they are in incomplete status. And in all probability, you might have to work on them first, or you might probably want to look at them and take some action. So any transactions that need your attention, they would be highlighted here, and you could see that the focus is on the incomplete tab. And if there are some invoices stuck in approval process, you could click on this to see their statuses. And I'm not particularly sure about the research, but if you're trying to load invoices using FPDI, and if it gets stuck somewhere, if the batch gets stuck, those will appear under the import exception. So if you click on import exceptions, it would show the batches that are stuck in the interface tables. And you could pick up a batch and you could click on import transactions again. So you see how many lines are there in total for different sources. There are around 26 unprocessed lines. And you could hit this import transactions button to try to re-import them again. If you have probably taken some action to resolve those errors, if you hit this button, it would act on, and it would resolve at least some of the errors. So the point I'm trying to highlight here is every work area would have a landing page, and that landing page would try to highlight the transactions that need users' attention. So if you go into payables and receivables, you would see the transactions appearing there. If you go into journals, you would see the journals which are in error state or incomplete state appearing there. And wherever you see a table, wherever you see a table, there are some properties that are associated with it. So the first thing that you need to understand is you're seeing 5 columns here, right? Or 6 columns. That does not mean these are the only 6 columns available in the table. There are some common options available here. Like you have an option to export the data, apply a filter, and you have options to sort the table rows, either ascending or descending order. You could also rearrange the columns as well. So if you want to make the customer column as a first column, you could move it, drag and drop the columns like that. And you could also export the data if you want. You could export it into an Excel file. And you also have, if you click on view option, you have a columns. And what do you see in there? You see that there are only 5 columns which are enabled by default. But you could also enable additional columns if you want. So if user wants to see some additional columns, if I want to see maybe a PO number associated with this AR invoice, or maybe the ship to customer or any other details, I could enable that here. Okay, if I want to see the bill to customer side, I could tick that box. And when I tick that, it starts appearing there. And I could bring it over and make it as a second column. Okay, so you have all the flexibility that you need. So and you also have an option to apply the filter. So you could search by transaction number. Okay, so you could apply the filter, search for a specific transaction. I think you have another 0. Okay, you could apply the filters, search for the transactions. You could export it, and you have a navigation options as well available there. And you could add and display additional columns if you want. But apart from this, there's one important property that I want to focus on, one important option, which is this who column. So if you click on this about this record, so you have this functionality in EBS as well. But in EBS, if you open up a form and if you click on about this record, it would show you the view based on which that form is built. In EBS, you would be able to figure out from which specific table the information is coming from. But if you look at about this record, or if you look at the record history in ERP Cloud or HCM Cloud or Fusion Cloud in general, you would have, in EBS, you would have 5 columns in the record history. You would have these 4 columns created by creation date, last updated by last updated date, and you would also have additional column called a view name in EBS. But in ERP Cloud, you don't have that view name. And that makes it quite difficult for us, or that makes our life slightly difficult, not quite difficult, slightly difficult. And it would be quite difficult if you are completely new to ERP Cloud. I'm saying slightly difficult for those of you who are coming from EBS, because most of the tables are still the same. The invoice information is still stored in RA customer transactional table only. Nothing has changed in that. So yes, point number 1, we don't get to see the view or a table from which this information is being pulled. Not just this information, any page, any screen you see, if you want to figure out from which table you're getting that information, there's no straightforward way. The only workaround that is available is, but I'll tell you a few tips on how to identify the tables when we build a BIP report. I'll explain what options you could use to quickly figure out what is the table that could store that information. But for now, there's another option available called a record issue under troubleshooting. So what you could do is you could hit this button, open up a session. You could go to the screen and try to search for a transaction. And if you want to see what query is executed in the background, that entire actions that you're performing after you hit this record issue would get saved, but you won't be able to download that particular the diagnostic log messages which are generated. So that would be available only for Oracle Cloud support. So what you could do is, if it becomes really difficult for you to figure out what query is getting executed in the backend, very rarely you get into that issue. But if you run into that issue, you could use this particular option, record issue, go to that particular screen, run the filter, and then that captures the query in a diagnostic log. You raise an SR with Oracle, ask them to provide the diagnostic log to you. In that diagnostic log, you would have the query that is captured. But you normally don't have to get down to that level just to figure out what table stores the information. In some cases, it gets complex, or maybe in a search screen, if you want to figure out how exactly the search is working in the background or what query is getting executed in the background, that's when you might probably have to use this record issue option. And if you're going to, within the work areas, you see these three tabs in common. Any page you go, you would see these three tabs. And the first one is called as a tasks ribbon. It would show the list of tasks a receivables user can perform. And you have a search option in there. And you have a reports and analytics option in there. So if you go into the tasks ribbon, you would see we are in billing receivables screen, right? Receivables billing screen. I should be able to create transactions. And before I could create a transaction, if I have to create a customer, I should also be able to do it. So I should be able to manage customers, transactions, and I should also be able to do the accounting bit as well. So all those tasks are appearing here. And if you look at the transaction task, I could create a transaction and I could manage the transactions as well. So if I click on create transaction, that would show that would take me into an invoice creation screen. And if you look at the business unit here, you would only be able to see a list of business units here. You would only be able to see the business units that your user has got access to. So within your security will be honored in all the screens in ERP cloud or a Fusion cloud as such in general, and only the access that you have would be displayed within the screens also. If you have got access to only one business unit, within the dropdown you would only see one business unit, and you would be able to transact, meaning create invoices or perform transactions only in that BU. First of all, what is a business unit? It is nothing but a replacement of operating unit in ERP cloud. In EBS you had operating unit, right? In ERP cloud they are replaced with business units. And in EBS, you have a concept of multi-org access control, right? Meaning from a single responsibility, you would be able to create transactions in multiple operating units, sorry. And in a similar fashion, in ERP cloud, you also have an option to create transactions in multiple business units. But what is the prerequisite for that? Of course, the user should have access to those multiple BUs. Okay, let's cancel this. And if you're going to manage transaction screen, if you're going to search screens, you would have manage screens in each and every work area. And a typical manage screen would have a few search options, and there would be a table. You enter the search criteria, hit the search button, that would display the results in the table. And if you look at the search results, there are some fields marked with a double asterisk. What does it mean? It means that at least one of them is required. So if I just hit the search button, what does it say? It says the same thing again. It highlights all the fields and it mentions that you have to enter one of the field at least. So which means I cannot search for transactions only based on BU. And these restrictions are placed or put in place by Oracle from a performance standpoint. You cannot pull all the transactions from BU, but you could do it by source, by number, date, or bill to customer. And if you remember any number, or if you know the customer name, you could search for that. And these columns that you see, say for example, I want to see the customers of Easy Solutions customer. Sorry, invoices of Easy Solutions customer. What I can do, I can search for a customer. And I can search for the transactions of that customer. And that would display the transactions. And all the story that I explained earlier a while ago about the table, that applies here as well. You have export options, you have filter options, you could rearrange the columns, you could sort by fields, sort the results in the table by any particular field. Okay, and if you expand the search, so this is how it normally works. And you And similar to the columns in the table, don't think that you can only search for the transactions using these criteria or using these fields. If you go into advanced tab, there are few more fields that you could use to search for transactions. If you click on advanced, you could see that there are n number of other fields that you could use to search for transactions. So if you just give you an example, if I come into the basic search options, I don't have an option to search for completed AR invoices. Yes, I want to search for completed AR invoices created for Easy Solutions customer, but I don't have a flag here, completed flag. So I have to go into advanced tab, and I could see that there is a complete flag in there. I could select this as yes, and I can click on done. And that would ensure that it would display the transactions with that additional criteria as well. So you go to advanced tab, you could enter the details and you could save it. So you could enter the details, maybe you could say complete flag as Y, and you could search for the customer. You could type in partially and you could tab out and you could do a search. So you could add additional filter criteria and then you could hit the search button after that. And what would happen? So it would search for transactions of Easy Solutions customer which are in complete status. Okay, so that's another key thing that you need to be aware of. You can go back into basic. So not just these fields, you might have few more fields available for you to help for transactions. And apart from this, when user comes into this particular screen, sometimes you might get this request from the users as well. They might ask you to default some values as a search criteria here. So if I am a user working in US1 business unit, or maybe based out of US, 8 out of 10 times I come into this screen, I would, or maybe 10 out of 10 times, I would have to search for transactions that belong to US1 business unit. And maybe the company that I'm working for, they deal with a specific customer quite frequently than others. So I would also want the bill to customer to be defaulted. In all other scenarios, I would change the bill to customer name and search for invoices with other customer number. Or maybe a transaction source, I might want, or client might ask you to default a specific value in there. And the requirement is when user navigates to this particular screen, they should be able to see a default search criteria, which is automatically applied. So if I click on done here, I've come back to the previous screen. And if you go back into manage transaction screen again, you notice that that particular bill to customer search that you have added is gone, right? So if you want to add a specific search criteria, and if you want to default that as and when a user comes into this screen, you could do that. How do you do it? You select the customer, assuming the customer is what a user has asked you to default, and you have an option to save this. You could save that particular search criteria as a custom search, and you could give it a name. You could probably say that it's a Easy Solution customer transactions. And you have two options there. You could set it as a default, which means when user comes into this screen, a bill to customer will be defaulted as Easy Solutions. And you could also tick this box, which would not only default Easy Solutions as a bill to customer, but it would also hit this button for you. It would also hit this search button for you. Okay, so if you click on run automatically, you would notice that whenever user comes into manage transaction screen, a bill to customer would be Easy Solutions and the transactions of Easy Solutions customer would be displayed there. And in that one odd scenario wherein he has to change the search criteria, he would explicitly change it. So you go into the task ribbon now, click on manage transactions. You would notice that directly the completed transactions, not the completed, the transactions of bill to customer are being pulled and displayed automatically. So this would save a bit of quite a bit of time, right? In case I have to always look for this particular customer transactions, I don't have to go through that search criteria always. So yes, we do have this option to be able to search or create a custom search and save it. Okay, that's another thing that you could probably take note of. And you have, yeah, if you go into manage transaction screen, we have seen the options that I've just explained. And if you want to search for an invoice by a transaction number, there are two ways you can do it. You can go into the tasks ribbon, you can go into manage transactions, and you can key in the transaction number here. You could expand this and you could key in the transaction number here and search for it. But if you know either the transaction number or the bill to customer number, there is an easy search option in available in that quick search option. So in every screen, don't think that I'm focusing too much on a specific screen in a specific module. The options that I'm explaining would be applicable for all the screens in all the modules, or for most of the screens at least. All the screens would have a similar sort of a functionality. So if you would have a manage screens, which would help you to pull out the transactions. You also have a quick search options, which would help you to pull the transactions by a quick identifier such as a transaction number or a bill to customer account number. So if you know the bill to customer account number, you could type it in and you do a search that would pull the transactions and display it for you. That is as good as going into manage customer transactions, sorry, manage transaction screen and searching by customer number. And you also have option to launch the reports directly from this particular screen. So you could go into shared reports and analytics work area, and you would see the AR related reports, and you could launch them from here. If you want to say run the billing history report for a specific customer, you could click on it. That would take you to a page. Yeah, you could edit it, or you can submit it directly from here. Yeah, you could schedule it as well if you want. Schedule, and if you go into more, that would take you into the catalog screen, and it would show you the reports. And this particular screen shows you the standard reports given by Oracle for receivables billing. And if you want, you could submit that as well. You should be able to submit that as well. Yeah, you could see the requests that have been submitted, and you could also trigger the request as well from here. Okay, so that's another option that is available. Let's go back to home page. And for some of the modules, Oracle has given dashboards as well. Say, for example, if you go into GL module, Oracle has given dashboards for some of the modules like GL and for payables also you have got dashboards. So these dashboards are meant to help end user do their task easily. So if you go into a GL dashboard, it will show you all the transactions or the journals that needs a user's attention. It shouldn't take this long ideally. Yeah, if you go into the dashboards, you would have multiple sections in the dashboards explaining or highlighting the tasks that I need to perform as a GL user. So you would have a close status indicating the period close status of the GL periods as well as subledger periods, and you have a journals tab which would show you the journals which are in error and all that stuff, intercompany transactions and account monitor. So some of the modules have dashboards like this, which would help users to get down to the tasks that they need to perform quite easily. But you also have this task ribbon in general, and that would help you to perform the transactions. And you also have the similar dashboard in the payables module as well. So if you go into payables, you could see that there is a similar dashboard in that. But this dashboard would show you the payables related information. Okay, invoices that need a payables user attention, PPRs which are running, supplier sites which are on payment hold, and all that stuff. Let me just go back into PPT. If this is fine, we reviewed the dashboards. We have seen the infolets yesterday, and we discussed these options as well. You could also save a custom search like this. Yeah. And before it gets boring, let's get into the interesting bit. Let's start off with the security now. And the way we understand security is, I'll not give the theory part first. Let's do a quick hands-on, not quick hands-on. We will do a few hands-on exercises to understand how the security works in ERP Cloud. So the first things first. So what screen do I need to use to create users in ERP Cloud? Under Tools, you have to go to Tools. Under Tools, you see a security console in there. So this is the screen that you need to access to deal with all the security related aspects in ERP Cloud. So you click on the security console. And you see this, we're getting a warning message here, right? I'll talk about this warning message. Please do remember this. Remember the fact that we're getting a warning message once we come into the security page. Okay, so it says that there is a sync process that hasn't been successfully or that hasn't been submitted in the past 24 hours. So it is asking us, it is just letting us know that a sync job has not been run for the past 24 hours. If you want, you can go ahead and run it now. A sort of a warning message letting us know that sync has not been run for the previous a few hours or the 24 hours. And in here, we will focus on the other we'll talk about the options available in here, all the options available in here. Let's first start off with users. If I have to create a user, I need to come into users tab. I can click on add user account. And when I add a user account, I could create a user and associate it with a person in the sense employee. And this would be required in case you have to access a few screens, such as a purchase order screen. Remember, to access some of the screens, you might need to have a person associated with your user profile. And one of the classic use case would be that if you have to access a purchase order screen or a PO receipt screen, you need to be registered. You need to have a person associated with your user, and that person should be registered as a buyer. But not every employee, not every user needs to have an employee associated with it, unless you have to do some FPDA loads, or unless you have to do some technical activity which would require access, or which would require your user to have a person associated with it. This would not be absolutely required. And usually the users, we would create a user manually here. And this is what you normally do for the implementation team. So if there are 4 or 5 technical consultants, or maybe 10 members working in an implementation project, comprising of technical and functional resources, for those resources, yeah, you might be creating, or the users might be created as a standalone implementation users without the person associated with it. But in real time, how does the users get created? Users would get automatically created as and when you load employees using HCM data loader. So you would, as and when you load employees using HCM into HCM Cloud, as and when you load employees, it would, the users would get automatically created for them. And you would not create the users one by one for the employees. You would only create users explicitly from this screen, only for some exceptional scenarios wherein you're working in an implementation team and you need access to the instance to do some activities. And what do you need to enter to have your user created? You can tag your user to a person type if you want. You could select it as worker, and you could search for a specific employee, and you could tag that particular employee to the user, or other way around, the user to an employee. Okay, and you could give in the details there, but this is not a mandatory step. And you could go in here and type in the name, first name, last name. Let's enter it as Fusion. user1. I'm not particularly sure if fusion.user1 already exists in this instance or not. But what do you notice in there? So the moment you type in a first name and last name and tab out, you notice that the username got defaulted as first name dot last name. Where is that coming from? That is coming from a user category that is used here. So if you go into user categories, let me just cancel this. You go into user categories, and the user category, there would be one default user category, and that user category would control few things. And what are those few things that user category controls? It would have a username generation rule, which would determine how a username needs to be generated. Should it be a first name dot last name, or should it be email, or a person number, or F last name? That means the first letter of your first name and the last name. And apart from these options, there are few more options that a user category determines, like how complex the password should be, when it should expire, and when the user should be prompted to reset the password and all that stuff. And as and when you create a new user, a notification would also be sent out to the user saying that a new account has been created for you. So that notification text also you can control by going into the notifications tab here. So there are few things that a user category controls, and one of them is the username generation tool. So you click on add user, you enter the details in there, Fusion user 1. And the moment you tab out, a username gets automatically generated as first name dot last name. And you can enter the password there. I would just say welcome 123 WN cats. Enter the username and password in there. And this is how you create a user. And if you just create a user, if you don't assign any roles to them, remember what I mentioned earlier, when you log into the application as a specific user, what you get to see within the application and what actions you will be able to perform will be determined by the roles that are assigned to your user profile. So if you don't assign anything, that user won't be able to see anything or do anything in the application. And now comes the interesting bit. So click on add role. So what types of roles are available in ERP Cloud? So let's talk about a job role first. So you have abstract role first. So any user you hire, so I'm not talking about implementation users, but if you talk about a normal employee being hired, so you hire a specific person as an employee, and you want to give him access to the basic functionality that every employee needs to have within the application. And in such cases, wherein you want to give access of a certain basic functionality to the users, you would be using abstract roles to achieve such functionality, such as the employee role. So you're hiring, say, 10 or 15 employees for different departments, 2 for GL, 3 for AR, and 4 for HCM. But all of them, end of the day, are employees, and they should have access to certain basic screens within the application. Maybe they should be able to, see their pay slips, they should be able to see the timesheets, and they might also be able to see the organization hierarchy, etc. Right? So to give access of the basic functionality to the users whom you're hiring as employees, you could achieve that by assigning a role called employee role. So this employee role is an example of an abstract role, wherein you give certain basic functionality access to all the employees. And you search for employee, you could see that there are 3 roles showing up with employee. So this is a copy role. It would help you. This is basically given as a backup for a seeded role definition. In case something is screwed up in this role definition, clients can look at this role definition or can make use of this role. Earlier, in the previous releases, we didn't have duplicate copies like this. And what happened was, if you go into roles tab and if you search for employee role, you can edit it the way you want. You could make changes to the seeded roles without, and system won't stop you from doing that. So very often clients have reached a point wherein they started editing seeded roles, and they end up in a situation where they want to go back to the original seeded role, and there was no way to go back because they've already made quite a few changes in there. And clients used to raise a service request with Oracle, and they used to provide they had to revert that role to back to original. So to avoid that, from the not from the past few releases, it has been there for quite some time. And since that point, what Oracle did is, for every role, they are also giving a copy role, a sort of a duplicate available for you in case you mess up something in a seeded role. And there's another role that starts with Aura underscore, and you have underscore abstract at the end. So this underscore abstract at the end, this would indicate what type of role it is. Is it an abstract role, job role, or a duty role? So we'll talk about job and duty roles in a moment. So it is an abstract role. So we know that this is an abstract role which would give access to the basic functionality that an employee needs to have. So you pick that one up and you select that. And as a thumb rule, so one of the roles that you see here, this is and the next question is, we now know why you are seeing duplicate roles here. And why are we seeing this Aura underscore role? Because you have same employee role appearing twice here, right? So the justification that Oracle provides us, they say that one of these roles has come from the upgrade. Okay, so they say that from the previous releases, this particular role has come into the Fusion application from the upgrade. So this would remain as is. And whenever you pick up a role, try to pick up a role which starts with Aura underscore always. Don't pick up a copy role, pick up a role which starts with Aura underscore. And you click on this particular option called add role membership. And when you do that, the role would get automatically added here. So now we have had this particular user as an employee. Okay, and we have given him access that a basic user or an employee needs to have. Let's save and close. Now let's log into the application from a different browser as a Fusion.1 user. So you search for Fusion.user1. You could see the user saved. Now you copy the application, go into a different browser, and you would be able to search for it. And after you search for it, yeah, you could log in as that new user that you have created, Fusion.user1, and you could mention, yeah, type in the username and password. Save it if you want. And what do I see when I log in? I see access to the bare minimum functionality that an employee needs to have. So I should be able to see my personal information directory, pay slips, and all other stuff. And I could also, I also have access to procurement. Probably if I have to raise a request to get some office supplies, I could do that. And I could also do the receiving part as well. And if you go into tools, that gives me access to the reports and analytics work area. That does not mean you get to see everything in there in the BA server. You will only be able to see the reports that you were given access to. Okay, and if you are probably used as an approver, you would probably be able to act on those notifications as well. And if you want to reset your password, you have an option to do that. So this particular user, or to this particular user, we have given him, since we have hired him as an employee, we have assigned him employee role, which would give him access to the screens that a user needs to have access to as an employee. Now, let's say that this particular user has been hired as a general accountant. Okay, he's hired as a general accountant, and he's supposed to manage a GL module. How do you give access to him? So if you when you create a user, this user would have received a notification. He would have logged in, and yeah, he would be happy to log in. But when he comes into this particular screen, he wouldn't be able to see anything related to GL. He won't be able to, in other words, he won't be able to do his job. So we have hired this person to hired this person as a general accountant, but he's not able to see the screens for him to be able to do his job. How do you give him that access? You give him that access by assigning him a job role. So you edit the user, you add a role, and you can search for a specific role in there. So you could say a general accountant. So now comes, so when you hire a specific person, you hire him to perform a specific job, isn't it? And those job roles, and how do you give access of that specific job to that particular person? You give access by assigning him a job role. So if you have hired this person as a general accountant, you would give him access that a user needs as a general accountant by assigning him a job role. So the job roles would sound like this. The job roles would be like general accountant, accounts receivable manager, or a HR specialist, right? So when you hire a people, you would hire him into a specific job. You would hire him to perform a specific job. And for that user to be able to perform that specific job, you need to assign him a job role. Okay. So you go ahead and assign a specific job role. So if you hire someone as a general accountant, you go ahead and add general accountant job role. So you pick up the general accountant job role, pick up a role that starts with or underscore, and you have underscore job at the end, indicating that it's a job role. And you have GL, which refers to the module, and general accountant is a role name. Add role membership. And you can save and close. Now let's try to sign out and sign in as that user again from here. Sign out. And how many tabs do we see now? We see only 4 tabs. Let's try to sign out and sign in back again. But how many tabs do we see now? We see payroll, we see general accounting, and we see intercompany accounting. So in addition to the previous options, previous 4 tabs, I could see that I've got access to a few more screens now, like maybe the enterprise. And if you go into others, you also got access to FRC as well, Financial Reporting Center. Remember, this is where you could run the financial reports from, or FRS reports from. So this user is able to see the general accounting related work areas or the navigation options. So I could go into general accounting, I could see general accounting, intercompany accounting, and the work areas. So I go into general accounting, and let's say I want to start the work and I want to create a journal. So I click on that. And the first thing it asked me to do was, it asked me to pick up a data access set. Or what is a data access set? You could think of it as a ledger. From a technical consultant standpoint, that's okay. Whenever you create a ledger, a data access set would get created in the backend with the same name. And you need to first pick up a data access set so that the screen could allow you and once you do that, the data belonging to that data access set would be displayed at the journals, and you would also be able to perform the transactions. But if I click on this, if I click on the drop down, I'm not able to see any data in there. I'm not able to see any ledgers in there, which means, yes, I was given access to the general accounting work areas. But how did we do it? How did we give this particular user access to general accounting work areas? By assigning him a job role. So assigning a job role to the user, would only give that particular user access to the functionality or access to the screens. But for that user to be able to do the transactions within that particular work area, you also have to grant him a data access. Okay, so granting access to data is completely different from granting access to the screens. So how do you grant access to the screens or the functionality? You could do it by assigning a job role. So if I click on OK, there is some bug within this particular screen. in this particular screen, it won't let you navigate out of this. So the best thing to do was put your application link in a different browser and you could close this. So I'm able to see the screens now, but but I don't have a way to create journals because I don't have access to any ledger at this point in time. Okay, so when you assign job roles, you only are assigning or granting data or granting access to the screens to the users. They won't be able to create transactions until you grant them data access. We'll park the data access for a moment. And let's say that, or let's do it this way. Okay, let me go back. Okay, we would come to the data access in a moment, but for now, let's say that we have made him a general accountant by assigning him a general accountant job role, but that user is still not able to do any transactions, and he won't be able to do it unless we grant data access to him. We'll talk about how to grant data access to the users probably tomorrow. We'll park it for tomorrow, and let's say that this particular user has also been hired, or let's say this particular user has been hired as a finance consultant, not as a GL consultant. So this user is supposed to take care of AR module as well, apart from GL. How do you make this user an accounts receivable specialist? You could do it by going ahead and assigning him a couple of more job roles. So you edit the role here, or edit the user profile, add roles, and you could search for a roles called accounts receivable. You have accounts receivable manager role. You could pick it up, and you could select the accounts receivable manager job role and assign him. And you also have a role called accounts receivable specialist. You could pick up that role as well and assign it to the users. So since we have had this specific user to look after GL and AR modules, we are assigning him a job roles related to those modules. So we've assigned him a general accountant job role and a couple of AR related job roles. And you save and close now. Now that you have added AR related roles now, if you sign out and sign in back again, you should see additional navigation options to go down to the receivable work areas. Click on confirm. Login back as the same user. And I'm now able to see the AR related work areas, receivables and the collections. But the problem with the data access would still remain same. If I go into billing, I don't see any data in here. And if I go into the tasks ribbon, I could see the transactions in there. I could see the tasks in there. But if I try to create an invoice, I would not be able to do it because a business unit is a mandatory column, and that a list of values would be blank for me. Okay, I don't see any list of values in there, any business units in the logo, because I was not given access to any specific BU. Okay, so this is how you grant access of the functionality to the users or to the screens. And this alone would not be sufficient. You have to grant explicit data access to the users depending on their profile. And how do you grant data access? What different options are available to do it? Let's focus on it tomorrow. Any questions, guys? Any questions in what we covered today?
Yeah, Prasad. So in real time, how it is going to work? So I have to work as a from user perspective or from a developer point of view. I mean, like I will assign roles and privileges to the end user, or I have to work as a GL consultant or AR invest consultant.
No, just to help you guys understand the security, I was referring to these roles, or I was referring to the user being hired as GL or AR. Your job would be to set up the security meaning assign the roles.
Okay.
Yeah. Just to make it easy for you guys to understand the concept, I was referring to the user being had as GL and AR. You wouldn't be the
Okay.
end user doing this.
Okay. 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 Yeah. Understood.
Okay? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we create a custom role?
Yes, you can do that. You have an option to create a custom role here. You go into roles and you have an option to create a custom role from here. We'll see how to do it in the next session, probably on Monday, or maybe if time permits, we'll do it tomorrow itself. If you go into the roles tab, you could see the seeded roles given by Oracle. And in most of the cases, you would be required to customize the seeded role rather than creating a new role from scratch. But I would also show you how to create a new custom role from scratch. You would have to do it when you have to give access of the ESS job you create to others. So when you create a BIP report, you would register it as an ESS job. And when you want to give access of your BIP report to others, or a ESS job to others, you would, in such scenario, you would create a custom role from scratch. In all other scenarios, yes, you would create custom roles, but you would be you would be customizing a seeded role given by Oracle. You would pick up a general accountant role, and you might probably take off a few privileges from that, which a client doesn't want to give to a general accountant, and then you would assign that custom job role to the users rather than a seeded general accountant role. Yes, you can create custom roles, you can customize seeded roles, all those options are available.
And we can get to know about roles only by the name of the roles, is it? Is there any more information related to roles available anywhere?
If you go to documentation, the documentation link, you would have the details about the specific roles. Yeah, but usually we search for roles by its name. But you have enough documentation available in case you are interested. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions, guys? Okay, I'll take it as no. We'll meet again tomorrow. We'll pick it up from here.
Hello, Prasad.
Yes, Niruddin. Yes.
Yeah, actually, like, how do we identify which is the abstract role, which is a job role, which is a duty role, and what is their respective functionality? Because in name here, as I have seen in seeded role, they have given the abstract role underscore abstract.
Correct. Underscore abstract and underscore a job in there. So I will explain the role
Specific
hierarchy.
definition. Like, I'm unclear on those points, that to who, what exactly the use of job role and abstract role. I got the thing that by adding the role we will be able to see the functionality under that role. But what exactly the job role is doing? What is the role of that job role in after adding into the user or any
Okay.
abstract role?
I will answer your question tomorrow. And what
Okay.
you will notice is that there is a hierarchy in place. Like if I open up
Mm-hmm.
the PPT, we haven't reached that stage. So I was just showing how it works in the
Okay.
UI so
Okay.
far.
No
So
issue
this
then.
is
If we
this
are
is
not, I thought I may have missed this one, so I was asking. But I'm just want to highlight that I am not clear on those things, that for what is the use of those role, job role, abstract role, and duty role. So
correct.
okay, no issue. If you are saying that we will be going to continue in next
Yeah,
session,
this is
then
what I will be explaining tomorrow. So a job role. So what I've
that will
shown
be
you
fine.
today
Not an
is
issue.
okay. Yeah, I'll explain this tomorrow. No problem.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Thanks for your time. We'll meet again tomorrow.